Hi everybody, Alex Deploy from Expert Forex, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about trailing stop strategies. I also refer to them as following stops. But these strategies are very, very important, and you'll see later on in the video that we have in fact got some EAs that rely totally on following stops to be profitable, and also EAs where it doesn't matter which direction you trade because your overall results will be profitable in the long run using mainly a set of following stops or trailing stops. So let's have a look at what these trailing stops are all about. At the end of the video you should be able to have a good feel of what their function is, how they work, and you'll also have a few ideas on how to use them very creatively to improve your profitability. So the main purpose of a trailing stop is really to protect any profits or gains that have been made up to date. But at the same time, you need to give your transactions enough room for the price action to continue to reach your eventual target. So it's a bit of a balancing act overall. So let's start with our first example. And our first example takes a trader who has placed a 100 pip stop and a 100 pip target on a particular transaction. Now let's take the example of this particular transaction here going to plus 40. Now when plus 40 is reached, the trader wants to protect the gain, so a trailing stop is activated and placed 40 pips behind the current price. So effectively what you have is a break-even transaction, because should the price come back and hit the trailing stop, you will come out of the transaction on a break-even basis, which also makes the transaction risk-free. Fantastic position to be in. Now should the transaction then move on to, let's say, plus 60, what then happens is the trader moves the trailing stop up by 20, and that we call a step of 20. So moves it up by 20 and it is now at plus 20. The trader is now assured of profitability, and the transaction hopefully has enough room with 40 pips of movement. If it then moves to 80, the same process, the trader then moves the trailing stop up by 20 pips. So 40 pips are being locked in, and the transaction still has 40 pips of freedom to move. At this stage, the transaction is then left, and it's either going to hit the target or come back and hit the following stop. So that's one way that trailing stops work. And to give you an idea of this in practice, we have trailing stops on most of our expert advisors, and I'll just show you the input screen of one of the expert advisors, our Make Money EA. So there we have the exact example that you've just seen. There's a stop of 100, there's a target of 100, there's a trailing stop that starts when the transaction is 40 pips positive. The size of the trailing stop is 40, and it will move in steps of 20. So it will stay still until this transaction reaches plus 60, as explained earlier. So that's an example of a trailing stop that's been pre-programmed into one of our EAs. Now the second example is a dynamic trailing stop. So the dynamic trailing stop basically reduces the size of the following stop as the price is getting closer and closer to the target, effectively squeezing the price between the trailing stop and the target as it gets closer and closer, making the loss if the price comes back smaller for the trader. So it would then start out exactly the same as before. We'd start out with a 40 pip trailing stop when the price goes to 40. But the difference here is that when the price goes to 60, the trailing stop will decrease in size to 30 pips. When it goes to 80, it will decrease to 20 pips. And when it goes to 90, it will decrease to 10 pips. So effectively, the trader cannot lose much or if the trailing stop is hit, but at the same time, there's enough room for the target to be hit. So that's the dynamic trailing stop, and we've also got that in some of our EAs. And let's have a look at the input screens on the Make Money EA. Now you can see this is a pretty simple one, because the dynamic stop only needs to know how many steps you want to take to reach the target. So it will calculate automatically the sizes of the stops as the price is moving to the target. So very simple input, but obviously if you're doing it manually, you would have to calculate when you need to move your stop every time. Okay, so let's look at another way that trailing stops can be used. Now in this example, we're saying that the a trailing stop will be activated when the transaction goes plus 30, and then there would be a 30 pip size trailing stop. It will be a break-even transaction. Then when the transaction goes up to 60, the trailing stop will be adjusted to plus 30, locking in that profitability. And then if it goes to 90, the trailing stop will be adjusted to plus 60, locking in that profitability. But the big difference here is there is no target. So now the trailing stop will just continue to follow the price in steps of 30, pushing the price higher and higher. So the price is either going to just go higher and higher, and eventually it will come back and reach the trading stop. If you catch price action that is trending, this is a very powerful tool to use. Also note that you can take the target out at any time using any of these approaches to increase your potential profitability on any of these transactions. And here's an example on the Make Money EA again, where we have taken the target out. The target is 0, or the take profit is 0, and the trailing stop size is 30, the step size is 30, and it will start activating when the transaction is plus 30. So there's a pre-programmed trailing stop that we would use on one of our EAs. So what are your trailing stop tools that you can use? Firstly, you've got to decide what is the size of the trailing stop. As we saw earlier, it could be variable, it could be fixed, but it must be a reasonable size to give the price enough room to move and yet protect your profits. Secondly, you need to decide on the step size. Now the step size can be 1 pip if you want, or 5 pips, or 10 pips, or 20 pips. So in other words, the trailing stop can update quite regularly. But just be careful, some of the brokers don't like transactions updated excessively, and if you'd make it 1 pip, it could update too rapidly for the broker, and they'll start complaining that their server is getting too busy on your particular account. So that's why we tend to go for updates of 10 pips or 20 pips. But you can decide on how you want to trade that one. The next point is, when are you going to activate a trailing stop? Do you want to, at what profitability level will you activate it? That is also quite a tricky one. You could do it too quickly or too early and be stopped out. You could stop a profitable transaction out too early in its life. And then the fourth one is the target. You can either have a fixed target or you can have no target and let the trailing stop in fact determine your target. Now that works quite well in some trading techniques where, for instance, the RSI trendline technique does not have clear targets, and therefore the following stop is sometimes a very good method to determine where the most efficient profitability levels lie. Now we have one EA that almost exclusively relies on break-even and trailing stops for its profitability. And the strange thing about this EA, we enter a buy and a sell at the same time every day, and it is overall profitable because the trailing stops are very efficient at determining the best exit levels for these transactions. This EA works particularly well with correlated currencies like the euro and the pound, or the euro and the franc, that the volatility is not so high, and we get extremely good results from this particular EA. And all it does is it's managing the transaction using trailing stops. Now you can see how efficient this EA has been. We've sold over 1,000 versions of this EA, and we have had only 3 clients that have asked for their money back based on profitability. Now if that doesn't tell you a story about a trailing stop, nothing will. But it's basically the trailing stops that make this EA as profitable as it is, and you can see we use a number of trailing stops at the same time. Now I hope I've given you some really good ideas on how to use trailing stops. They are fantastic tools for manual trading, and you'll see in my daily manual trading analysis services that I do use trailing stops in all the transactions. They are also very good for automated transactions, easy to program into an EA, and most of our EAs in fact do have trailing stops built into them. Now, if you want more information about the EAs that I've mentioned, there is a link on your screen right now where you can go to have a look at all our EAs, but in particular the two that I've mentioned that use trailing stops quite efficiently. So if you found this video interesting, please join my channel if you haven't done so before. Please click on the like button, give the video a like, and if you have any comments or questions regarding this video, please make the comments in the comment section on the YouTube website. I tend to answer all questions and respond to all comments, so please do that so that I can get a feel of any information that has been left out of this video. So from me, Alex Deploy, cheerio.